Let's start off with an easy question. What is an expressive capacity?
Well, that's not necessarily an easy question, but for me, the way I use that term, expressive capacity, is that it is a generalization for something of which language, the thing that we're using right now, is an instance. Frequently we think of capacity as in the size of something, like how much capacity does this quart jar have? It has 1 quart capacity. That's not what I'm talking about. It's not capacity as in quantity, it's capacity as in capability, or the ability to do something. And specifically, it's the ability to create utterances, to create speech in some realm. So, for example, language is one expressive capacity that gives us the ability to create in the realm of representational thought, especially causal thought, being able to see what the relationships are of cause and effect and communicate them to each other so that we can locate things in space and talk about causality and what's going to happen in them. There are lots of other expressive capacities as well, but I don't know if that's enough for the question to get a sense of it.
Yeah, I was just kind of trying to get into the conversation. So, what expressive capacity do you think is needed or would be helpful for us that is currently lacking from the English language?
Well, the way you put the question, I don't quite have an answer to it, because it's not that something is lacking in the English language that might be available in some other human language, because that's not where I see the lack. So the thing is that all human languages are based, as far as I know, are based on subject-object predicates. And so you have those basic constructions that are the same across all human languages. Not all of them have all the same grammatical elements, because some cultures emphasize different aspects, and there is expressivity that's available in some languages that's not available in others. But the thing that I'm particularly interested in is the expressive capacity that's not in the realm of representational thought and meaning, but is in the realm of creating value together socially. So how do we build well-being socially? What is our expressive capacity? What is the language of creating social well-being together? And I think that that's missing from all human languages as something that allows us to generate social well-being in embodied practical ways. We obviously do it all the time because language gives us culture, but it's very slow. And the ability for societies to form around language it comes from our ability to create culture. But language is not an expressive capacity that's tuned to exactly that need that I see. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Do you think that there's something in the English language or the language that we use right now that creates a misunderstanding that can't be corrected just through speech?
That's an interesting question. There are definitely ontological mistakes that are built into our languages, and they are built into some languages, some human languages, more than others. For example, we say things like, I am a plumber, or I am a Christian. And those statements are incorrect, actually, because we are not, my being is not a plumber, or a Christian, or a Jew, or a U.S. citizen. I am not, the verb to be is actually incorrect in that context. And there's a whole version of the English language called E prime in which you drop the verb to be because of the ontological mistake that entails. And so when we use language and we use some of the ontological mistakes that are built into language, they cause mistakes. But the piece that I'm more interested in isn't in the failures that are built into particular languages, but actually expressive capacity at a whole nother level, like I was saying before.
Well, that's my next question, is what opportunity do you think we have through technology to create new expressive capacities?
Yeah, it's an interesting way of phrasing that question. What opportunity do we have through technology of creating a new expressive capacity? So the way I would answer that question is by starting with the technologies that we have already that creates those kind of thriving group the group that thrives, where you feel magic in life. So when you're in a jazz band and the melody is pouring out through all of the people together, and there's that kind of magic that happens, or when you're in that sports team, whatever the sport is that you play, and everybody knows their place and sees the emerging whole of the game that's happening and responds to the challenge and does it in that way that's perfect, even if there's different roles. There's built-in technology into our bodies, and language is one of the technologies that we've developed to be able to actually send signals to coordinate our action in those contexts. And in the case of the jazz band, body language, and there's also agreements and norms that have been set that allow us to play roles, and we hold those in our brains, and because we know them. Our cognitive systems actually are a form, you can look at them as a form of technology that allows for that experience of being in a magical group to happen. The thing that is possible now that we have the internet and we have networked computers is to take that experience, to live into the possibility of what we have experienced of magics in those small groups and scale them up to large groups. Because we have the signaling systems, and we have the possibility of group memory, and we have the possibility of creating grammatical agreement structures that are represented in those signaling systems to do structurally what we already do internally with our own cognitive systems and with our own awareness systems with our eyes and our ears in local and small space and small groups. We have the capacity to scale that up. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's possible. That's the reality that I see that is showing up, that's available to us.
Right. Do you think that sort of expressive capacity could be created or fully maintained without technology?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Not to that scale. Not if you want to. If what we want to have, which is what I want to have. I want to have the experience that I've had in that jazz band. I want to have our world live that experience, mm-hmm. and it feels to me like it is possible, because there are some very specific criteria that make that actually possible. Mm-hmm. It's the ability of people to see the emerging whole and act as sovereigns in it, as opposed to be under the direction of management and our humanity being pulled out of us because we actually can't be fully sovereign and act out of that sovereignty. So we are less than human in large organizations. We must be, because we can't scale otherwise. And so without something to aid the built-in capacities that we have, so something to aid the built-in capacities that we have, it's not possible. And that something to aid I would call technology. Mm-hmm. Now, whether that is the internet and a computer, or it's whiteboards, or it's messaging systems with pigeons, or whatever it is, it's going to be technological, right, by my definition of technology. Right. So no, it's not possible.
Right. Okay, do you have an example of something like this that's already happening?
Sure. There's a bunch of, the new way it's showing up. You mean the of what's new that allows this capacity, allows us to have groups and form that have this different feel to them than the current ones we're living in? That's the question?
Is there currently a group like that?
At the large scale, not fully. I don't think so. But there are things that point the door to it, that open the door to what it's like to live in that space. I'll give you two examples. Mm-hmm. And one is not familiar to people who haven't done it, and that is being a coder in the open source world. Mm-hmm. So if you've participated in an open source project and have written software for it, you've participated in a community in which you get to act as a sovereign and contribute to the whole, and you know what your role is, and there's no central management, mm-hmm. and yet there's this kind of magical thing that shows up. Mm-hmm. And we've seen the results of it. I mean, the internet is largely run by computers that use Linux, and so the results are clearly powerful. And it was developed in less time, and there's all the statistics people talk about open source software. I'm talking about the feeling of participating in an open source development project and how that's different, and the kind of magic that's available because of some of the decentralized tools that are available to open source coders. The one that people may have had more experience of is couch surfing. If you think of what it's like relationally to go to a hotel, and what kind of relationships and what kind of magic is established, what kind of human feeling is created in the context of a hotel, as compared to couch surfing, there's a world of a difference. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't great things about hotels, and that there aren't terrible things about couch surfing, and people will be able to come up with all kinds of great stories that they've told, but what I'm speaking to is the structural difference of the two, and how in the space of couch surfing, where there is an informational mediation of the cultural contract, the social contract, of what's okay and what's not okay, and the reputation of people's participation in that context of providing housing and accepting housing, being a host, being a good host, and being a good guest. That is made visible through technological indicators. That is the scaling up of that guest-host relationship that we have in the small scale of hospitality, but making that global to the scale that right now there's 2 million beds that are available. 2 million. Well, it's hard. I mean, the language of use case doesn't trigger things for me, and because what that feels like is the use case of a particular product or something like that, and that's not where it is. Where this comes out to me because when there's a new expressive capacity that allows us to create social organisms, the use case is the creation of lots of social organisms. And so basically anything that happens as a result of the gathered power of many people. And so that can be entirely purposeful because like you want to get to the moon, right? There's a use case that there will be a whole different ways of getting to the moon in this other paradigm. I mean, it's not a paradigm, in this new capacity with those languages, with that new expressive capacity available to us. I mean, to me, I think the central, from that view of a use case, the central use case is a non-domination-based way of making decisions together and being able to act together. That's the central use case. Because the current way we operate at large scale is based on hierarchies, which must be domination-based as a matter of fact, not as a matter of structure.
Right.
It's not a moral issue,
right,
one way or the other. And so for me, what the centralized one of the central foundational reasons for this is to make it as a matter of fact that doesn't have to be the way we organize together.
Okay, so I wake up in the morning, and I live in an intentional community. And we have a farm there, and we also produce nut butters. Okay, because we grow a lot of nuts. We grow a lot of other stuff too, but hey, we're jarring up some nut butter so that we can use it as what? I mean, do we trade it? What are some of the possibilities for what we could do with that nut butter and what we could do as a community that would be possible in this new system that aren't possible now, or it would be a lot easier at least?
So let's just look at distribution. Maybe I can go somewhere with that. Right now, when you want to get that nut butter to market, what do? You
take it to a store.
Okay. Or?
Sell it to a distributor.
Or
put it online and sell it online.
Or you have a little stand by your door, right? Okay, so the thing that's happening in all those cases is that we're trying to find a place where there's a desire for that nut butter to go, so where there's a need, and we're trying to match the surplus that we have with that need, right? And so the current economy is filled with ideas about how you do that and how money acts as intermediary for doing that, and how that you can measure the value of the nut butter by a competitive marketplace where you do all this stuff. We know that, right? So what's different? What's different is that in a world where there's a new expressive capacity for gathering ourselves together, we are able to, and we have decided to, measure the value that's produced in the creation of that nut butter at a whole set of different levels that respond to the systemic realities. So that means that we can measure the flows of material that are needed to produce that nut butter, but we're also keeping track of, we are taking account of, which doesn't necessarily mean writing numbers down, of the effects that harvesting that nut butter has on our local forest, and not harvesting the nuts has on it, and also the social effects of what it's like to be in the production of that. And so that there's a context of understanding and seeing the deep value that takes place in the production of that. And because of that, it's hard to describe this. Because of that, then there's also sort of the flip side of the making visible of that value to the folks who want to participate in its consumption.
Right.
And so that means that if it is valuable to people that nut butter was produced organically and it was produced without child labor, and it was produced in with whatever set of variables are that matter to you.
Let's say in this particular intentional community we have a food forest that's got a lot of nut trees, and we are we're increasing the quality of life for the people in this community, and we're helping out the community in other ways, and we can show this, we're accounting for all of this. But then there's this other people down the road who have just rows upon rows of one kind of tree, and they're also producing nut butter. Is it that we have this already interconnected web of people who are dedicated to supporting us? Is that the kind of thing? Or is it just that we can show that we're doing better on the open market?
It's both. The thing that's going on is that there is a language in which you can show those things that you're talking about. There is a place that can represent that stuff grammatically, and that is shared by the whole realm of people who want to participate and play games together. So in this case, right now what we have is things like certified organic and certified biodynamic and certified, in this case it would be permaculture certified. But what grammatical entity holds those certifications, and where does that live, and how interoperable are those certifications?
It's a hierarchical system right now of
and not only that, they're not available to everybody. It's actually not part of anything. It's just an isolated event. That's not part of a wider expressive capacity of value. It's separated from the monetary system entirely. You might have a sticker on your thing that then you pay money for, but the pricing happens at a completely different level. And so there's no it's so hard to
Is
talk
there
about
some way that
embodied...
people who support this farm would be getting more value in some way? I mean, would that be actually tracked in some way that they are kind of investing in a larger community type thing? I mean, is that a sense that they would get, or is that something more tangible in this case?
So you're talking about the people who
buy the nut butter, or who trade, or how would the actual, would they be in more of a CSA kind of thing, or would they be using money? I mean, what fundamentally would be different about this that we can't do now?
When you go to the store, so if you have a CSA nearby, if you go to the CSA and you see all the things that the CSA does, you can get a sense of what the practices are and how that CSA grows that nut butter.
Yeah.
So we're back to the original collective intelligence that I was talking about before. We're into the built-in tools that we have. When you go and you have a one-on-one relationship with a person, then you can actually make decisions about about making your consumption of a product meet your values. You cannot do that in the current marketplace. It's not possible, because the dimensionality of value is squozen down into one rational number called the price. And if the whole community starts to value organicness more, and then there's a high demand for it, then the price goes up, and then there's a lot of value, and the price goes down. But you can't actually get at that. There is not enough information to reflect the values that you carry.
Right. So if someone were intentionally trying to support these ventures or groups who are doing things in a more sustainable way, what would what would that reflect on them? Would there be this like system that's actually like showing that this person has invested more in environmental sustainability than someone who just is still going to the grocery store and buying stuff from China? Like what do they get out of participate, or what's the value? How does the value, how is it reflected? How is that value reflected?
I'm not quite sure I get where this question is coming from. Are you, so what
like, what's the point? Why would people...
Well, so from a simple level is I don't want to buy
Right.
stuff that kills the forest.
Right.
So, but you're asking the other way around is you want to play with people who are like that, who don't want to buy stuff that kills the forest.
Right.
So you might want to also, in a new expressive capacity that's also part of the shared space of meaning about how we organize each other, is have reputations of
Right.
buyers.
Right.
So you may want to create a reputation currency, as we call them,
Right.
for buyers, that then a vendor might say, oh, you're a buyer, or you're a person who comes and you take
That's
you take
something
my
we
nuts out.
can't do right now.
Sure, that's something,
Sure.
well,
I'm trying to think of some things that you can point at that say this is something we can't do right now,
Right.
that we could do in the future, that you could actually like
Well,
keep
that's a
track
good-
of how people are buying and they're using their money, and that they could have some sort of reputation on that or something that
Sure.
they could then use to
well, I
be
mean,
involved in other
so
things.
we are doing that in the sense of if you do an eBay transaction, there's a buyer reputation and a seller reputation.
Right,
And
right.
so it shows up, that's an example of how the door is opening into that.
Mm-hmm.
But if the point of this whole conversation is speaking to expressive capacities that can hold that, the piece that I'm deeply interested in, and in what my work is to create, is a shared space where all of these kinds of statements can be made in a linguistic fashion. So that it's not just stuck in eBay, your buyer reputation and your seller reputation,
Right.
but that's actually available and is part of something that's a part of a composable unit, just like the words that I'm saying are composable and can create shared meaning.
Right.
We need that same kind of functionality for creating shared value together.
Okay. So, like in this future, do you see that people would have some sort of a profile that would include all of this information?
They would build their own profile that might include that information if they want to, and there will be people who will be building profiles for other people.
Right,
So
right.
if